Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Michael Regina. I am the author and illustrator of The Sleepover, the all-ages horror graphic novel from Penguin Razorbill. I also created the Adamsville series, both perfect books for this sort of spooky season if you're looking for a fun graphic novel read. Hope you check them out. I'm back with another video talking about some creative processes, and the point of this video specifically is in reference to something I get asked all the time. Where do your ideas come from? Or also, how do you turn an idea into a book? So that's what we're going to talk about. I'm going to talk about how I come up with an idea and develop an idea into a book. I'm going to try to do this pretty quickly, but if you also want to get a full breakdown of this, in the links below, you can sign up for my email list and I will send you a PDF with sort of the breakdown of all of this. So yeah. Sign up for my mailing list and subscribe to this channel and stuff, and then so you can get more videos like this. So talking about where ideas come from. For me, it starts with, why do stories exist at all, right? One of my favorite writers, Brian McDonald, says that stories exist to communicate survival information. Essentially, we would tell stories like back in the day when we were hunters and gatherers and things like this, of, hey, you stay out of caves because there's monsters in there, or, whatever the case might be. Most of the storytelling was made to convey to people how to survive, whether it be physically or maybe emotionally. Stories have a point. There's a general theme or message to them. So understanding this is an integral part of getting started. To that end, I think the best stories, the best concepts start with a combination of internal conflict and external conflict that work together to communicate a piece of survival information. It's a bit of a hard target to hit, but that's sort of where it starts with me, or I should say, that's where an idea will start to really hit the road, is when I feel like a story is not only tackling an external conflict, but an internal conflict. But let's start with maybe where that all begins. Oftentimes, an idea starts for me by thinking of some sort of external conflict, whether it's I want a group of kids who are trapped inside of a house with a babysitter that they believe is a witch from local legend, or in this current book, I want a group of kids who are trying to find and capture or defeat a monster within their local river. And that sort of thing is what gets me excited. Mostly what happens, and I would challenge all of you to think about it this way, is to think about the idea or the story that you wish you could go to the bookstore right now and pick up, or a movie you wish you could go watch right now that doesn't exist. And if it were to exist and you were able to get your hands on it, it would be your favorite thing that ever existed. That's sort of like a good barometer for me to start from, as I will stop and I'll ask myself, what is a thing that I want to read right now in comics form that doesn't exist? And that's where I will often find a lot of my ideas. And it's also thinking about things that interest me. Often that is what it is. It's like, I want to read a version of Jaws for children, and so I go make that thing. So yeah, stopping and asking yourself about what excites you as a storyteller and what's the thing you wish existed but didn't, and then seeing if anything resonates there. See if the beginnings of an idea start to germinate by thinking of that. And then once you start to get these basic ideas out, you want to capture these ideas as much as possible. For me, capturing ideas starts with just a notebook, whether it be digital or physical. I actually do a little bit of a combination of both. And what I try to do is just free form capture ideas as often as they come to me. Maybe it's just an idea of a character conflict, or maybe it's just building upon those building blocks of whatever I think the external conflict is. So what is this monster? Where did this monster come from? Why is this monster here? What does this monster want? And then thinking about characters that might make sense. At this early stage, you just want to be as free form and low pressure as possible. If an idea comes to you, jot it down. If it doesn't work, throw it out, and have some sort of way to know when you're on the right track, either by putting an asterisk next to an idea, or have a document for brain dumping ideas, but then also a document to copy and paste the ones you feel like are the ones you want to develop. Essentially, allow yourself to have fun and explore for a certain period of time. If you're struggling with how to get ideas rolling, there's some great tools out there. Some people like to use random story generation with things like the Story Engine deck, which is one of my favorite tools. I love messing around with this tool. Also, I've talked a lot about using TTRPGs to develop ideas. In fact, my next video series will be using solo TTRPG or tabletop role-playing games to write and develop a story. So we're going to talk a lot about how to use that in the upcoming future. And just sitting down and watching things that excite you. If you're feeling uninspired, the best thing to do is to search for things that inspire you. So that might be things you already love, random story generators like I've already mentioned, or just going on a walk or taking a trip. Just allow yourself to think through ideas. And if you're having a hard time getting kickstarted, hopefully something like a random story generator or a movie you love or a book that you love will help get those gears turning. Then I start asking myself a series of baseline questions to really get a good idea of what the story is. Each one of these questions is probably sufficient enough to create its own video out of, but I'm going to broadly touch on each of them real quick. The first thing I would start to ask is where does this story take place? Is it in the real world, in some sort of fantastical world, a place that's not our own? You want to understand the setting for your book. Then you might want to start thinking about what sort of genre does this book fit in? Is it horror? Is it fantasy? Is it drama? Is it some sort of comedy, although comedy usually finds its way into just about everything, it seems like these days. But the point being, what kind of idea are you designing? And if you're not quite sure how to figure out the genre of your story, I highly recommend reading Blake Snyder's Save the Cat and looking at his genre section where he explains sort of the 10 different sort of story genres that exist. So recommend checking that out. It'll give you a really good idea of what is my story fitting into? Then start thinking about what kind of things are you excited about as a story? And then if you could tell any kind of story right now, what's the thing that you would want to do? What's the kind of story you're just itching to tell? And make note of those emotions so that you understand the flavor and the tone and the spirit of the story you're developing. Then thinking through the big external conflicts of the story. What is the problem, the physical or external problem that is facing your characters and that they're going to have to overcome through the course of the journey? Then for me, the sort of real icing on the cake that takes a story from being something that I think is interesting to something I simply have to make is when I start to marry it with some sort of internal story. Oftentimes what happens with me is I will have something that I really want to talk about, some sort of struggle I'm dealing with currently or issue that I'm trying to wrestle my mind through, which is happening a lot through Deepwater Creek. That gets me to the drawing board that says, this is the survival information I want to communicate to the world. This is the external conflict of my story. With the sleepover, it was what the survival information is. How do we survive in a world full of grief? What is the thing? How do we help each other when we live in a world full of heartbreak? And hopefully, by reading a story about monsters and a sleepover party and all this stuff, people can walk away from that story with a sense of, I know that I should support other people, and I should also not bottle up my own emotions. And so that's the internal piece. And then as what's great is if you can start to get an idea of what this sort of internal conflict is, it becomes much easier to start thinking about what kinds of characters you need, right? So let's say, for instance, that through laying out my story, I determined that I need a story, or I want to write a story about someone who struggles with greed or is a very greedy person. It becomes very evident to me that part of what I need to design is a character who in some way is struggling with greed. Either they want money or they don't have money, or they have a lot of it and they're already greedy and they're learning their lessons through it. But we need some sort of character that is dealing with the internal conflict of the story through an external conflict as well. So we're looking for characters that help support our internal conflict along with the external conflict. And this part, honestly, just takes a little bit of time and openness to explore. I would say that the next thing, though, once you start to outline this is, man, I hate this step. I'll be honest with you. It's like my least favorite thing in the world, but it is an extremely helpful exercise, is to learn to write a log line for your story, or that quick elevator pitch. And a quick elevator pitch is just your story in one sentence. If you had to tell it to somebody, or 1 to 2 sentences, if you had to tell somebody about it real quick on an elevator, what would it be? The reason this is so important is it gets to the quick of hopefully all these sorts of questions that you've been asking. If you've been thinking through some of these problems, you at least will have some sort of character, a setting, a external conflict that you can relay to other people. In fact, your internal conflict is almost likely not to be a part of the log line. It's because most of the time, the thing that gets somebody excited to read your story is not, my character is dealing with family issues. It's about, my character's father passed away and has to return home to collect its inheritance, but means that they have to confront their family they've been estranged to for the last decade, right? That's an external conflict, and it has hints of the internal conflict. So if you can sit down and actually write a log line, it's super helpful. I'm going to put a link in the description that has a great video that you can watch that explains 2 different logline processes that have really helped this not be quite so tedious for me. So you can find that down in the links below. Then from there, once I feel like I have that logline piece, I get to work on a full-blown treatment of my story. I start breaking down scenes. I start just freewheeling an idea, trying to get it as solidified as possible through some sort of synopsis. And it's this sort of like, it's like a piece of like marble that we're just constantly like chipping away at, trying to find the statue underneath. And it just takes a lot of time. And that's another piece of advice, like, be patient with this. And by patient, I don't mean take a decade. I mean, it's okay that if you didn't write a chapter every day, I often will spend weeks, a couple weeks or so, just walking around asking myself ideas. Part of that, I think, is because I have a process that I need to develop and hone more, which I'm hoping this sort of discussion on TTRPG solo play will be helpful with, not only for me, but for you. But the idea is, give the idea some time, write out an outline, look at that outline, throw stuff out, start all over again. But basically, you got to start taking all these ideas and honing them together. Another thing, again, a plug for Save the Cat. Using the sort of beat sheet method that he has in there will do wonders for you in making sure that you are writing a concise outline that you can start from. So I would say start with Save the Cat's beat sheet, and then from the beat sheet move into a full-blown treatment of each scene, and then start your way onto making some sort of story. That's the process I tend to follow anyway. And then once you've slapped all these pieces together, you've at least, hopefully, if you followed along with me, gotten yourself from I don't know what I'm working on to I know what I'm working on, I know what I'm excited about, I have my log line, I have a synopsis, I have a treatment, and then at some point you just got to look at that thing and say it's time to make a story. And for me, I really get to that point when I feel like I have a really detailed outline. I am definitely an outliner primarily, but once I have a really good outline for the story, I feel ready to start writing it. Again, I'm hopefully learning some different ways to approach that, and that we'll be doing in that video series coming up. But that's when I know it's time to get started. Once I can read an outline and feel like that's pretty good, then it's time to start writing. And then you just got to sit at the keyboard and either get to writing on your word processor or maybe thumbnailing your comic, however you choose to approach it. But yeah, that's it. It's really, it sounds maybe simple or daunting, I'm not sure, depending on your perspective. But the idea is allow yourself to be inspired by the things that you like, slowly develop an idea, be patient with it. But, I would double back on the slowly thing and say, yeah, be patient, but also self-made deadlines are a great thing. And the more you can put something down on a sheet of paper or on a word processor to react to, the better. Because the sooner you go from staring at a blank page to crafting an idea, the easier it becomes to fix things. So hopefully that was helpful. Like I said, I've got a video series coming up on using solo role-playing games to teach you how to write. I'm hoping that will be an October series of videos, but I'm going to record all of it and edit all of it before I put it on my channel. So it's mostly going to depend on how long does it take me to get there. But please subscribe to the channel so that you get notified when that happens. And thank you for being here. It's been awesome watching the channel grow. I hope I've been helpful, and I look forward to talking with you all real soon. Take care.